So for Leader U residents, that's our 2-year program. It's for people who just want a longer runway to leadership. You start the year in the classroom and you have an associate teacher. And what you are doing is coaching that associate teacher basically to take over your job. One of the biggest criticisms of leadership and leadership in charter schools is that our leaders are very young, we pull talent from classes, and kids suffer in the meantime. Well, we would like to prevent that from happening as much as possible by when you leave the classroom to become a Leader U fellow in the 2nd year, you'll have trained somebody to take over that role. And a lot of you have probably seen the associate teacher model in different ways in your schools. And it's interesting to see how different campuses are sort of perfecting it and making the model their own. So you're responsible for coaching that associate teacher and really digging deep in what it takes to move the needle when you're not exactly you're not the person who's teaching and leading the class anymore. We ask that you lead at least one school-based initiative with staff. Again, getting the experience of leading adults in something, which is very different than leading children. And it's purposely vague because the decision is going to be very unique to your skill set, the school's needs, and just how you are going to work with your principal. Most associate teachers, most associate teachers are not. Sorry, I'm a little thrown off for a second. So I don't know what I was talking about. Yeah, I'm saying that in the sorry. Most residents are doing more than one school-based initiative and having more than one teacher that they are coaching. But again, that's a decision, and what that looks like is going to be different. Monthly curricular focuses. So each month, basically because of the longer runway, you have a different curricular focus. So it is December. It's November. It's almost December. So our focus was math, and so we had the residents read a few articles about math, best practices in math. Now they are observing different teachers in math, and they're going to workshop their feedback. The idea being that a lot of our leaders have been great science teachers, great history teachers, great ELA teachers, and then you have to give feedback and coach people that don't teach those subjects. So this gives you a bit of experience in doing that and giving feedback that's not just about the taxonomies, but actually rooted in curriculum. So that's our 2-year program, in the first year anyway. And then we have our Leader U Fellow program. And so that is a 1-year program, and so you are placed in a school of residency. The way we do that is our school leaders complete a survey right now. Our fellows complete a survey, and then you're placed in a school where your skill set meets a need within the school, and that the school provides a strength that you can observe and learn from. It's not exact science, but it worked pretty well this year, so we're hoping to continue the magic for next year. Right now, working with emerging leaders in building excellent schools, that relationship will probably change for next year. It's not that we won't work with building excellent schools, we will always, but the exact program won't be the same, just because what we're realizing is while everyone benefits from Sue Walsh and Eileen Callahan's hand, if you don't know them, you will at some point. But more that people need to be working in the schools. That's where the experience and the leadership is going to be. And so we're going to work through how to get you into great schools and visiting great schools. So there will be that aspect that you'll still gain from the program. It's just going to look a little bit different. There is a summer induction. And so again, details are still getting worked out. But a week, 2 weeks in July, where we kind of go over an overview over what makes democracy prep, what's good feedback, sort of an intro to everything. Basically, you go through 4 different initiatives right now. We avoid the term project. It sounds very school of ed, and this is not a school of ed. You don't pass. There is no rubric. There is no A+. There is none of that. It's that leadership. You're presented with situations, and you have to make calls all the time. And it's not always going to be perfect. It's about making the right calls for the right decisions. And that can be a little bit messy. And so the vagueness of it, I know, is a frustration point for a lot of fellows and residents. Is that, well, what exactly do I have to do? I don't know. Like, what's the context? What's the situation? And so there's coaching throughout those initiatives. Fellows may opt into the curricular talk. So if you are someone who goes straight into the 1-year program, you're like, you know what? Like, I actually don't know that much about science. You can opt into our curricular talks, and actually our principals can as well. Alexa joined our ELA conversation a few weeks ago. And then there's other workshops that we're developing along the way. So that's kind of a quick overview. And then obviously the initiative, those are the 4 initiatives as they stand right now. Not to say they're not going to get tweaked along the way. but one is proactive culture, one is coaching teachers effectively in a one-on-one situation. One is coaching and leading a team. Obviously, coaching one teacher to successfully implement feedback is one skill set. Coaching a grade level team or department or some level of some group of adults is a very different skill set. And then family engagement and messaging. So that's a quick overview. And so, again, the people that you actually want to hear from are our leaders and our fellows and our residents. And so we're going to start with our leaders. And so thank you guys for taking, and all of you, because you are all incredibly busy, for taking this time. And so I'd like to start with Alexa. And so for our leaders, the question I'd like you to answer for these guys is what made you choose leadership at Democracy Prep? And then what's one highlight of the job, expected or unexpected, and what's one challenge of the job? And then we'll have the fellows and residents say the same. Once they share their experiences, then we'll open it up for questions and answers. Okay? So, Alexa, take it away.
Hi everyone, I'm Alexa. I'm the Upper Academy Director at Harlem Prep Elementary. So sort of my path to that position, my leadership there. I started as a teacher at Harlem Prep in the first year of the turnaround several years ago, 2011, and was a teacher in 4th grade, became the grade level chair, and then decided last year to apply for Leader U. And in that process, it was actually on my final interview day that I was told there was actually an opening in leadership at the school, and I was sort of the person they were looking for that position. So it truly is the pipeline towards leadership. Not promising that if you apply, you're going to end up a school leader next year. That's just how it worked out for me in the situation at my school. The reason I wanted to pursue leadership at Democracy Prep, it was really wonderful to sort of get to be at the school where I had taught in the start of this process, to know many of the families, to have those relationships already. And then Democracy Prep as a network, I've always felt has pushed me just beyond my comfort zone continuously over the years, providing what I needed to continue to grow, which was not to feel safe, not to feel comfortable, to continue to be challenged. And the support along the way has been really incredible. So that's why I'm a leader at HP. My challenge, I would say I'll start with the challenge so we can end on the glow. My challenge, I think, is managing that balance for the adults in the profession of it's hard work. There is a lot to do, and then balancing not ever apologizing for the work we do because it is so important, because our kids deserve it. Finding the way to explain the why and still meet the needs of adults in a building while not ever backing down from what you know needs to happen for kids is really hard. And is the challenge that I definitely face, and people face too. The thing that's awesome that I was actually kind of nervous about, I can be the person who spotlights that we're never too young to do this job. And I was worried that interacting with parents would be hard, that they wouldn't really see me as someone that they would trust with the education of their children as a leader of a school. And I really haven't found that. Working with parents and being someone who's on their team to problem solve and find the right solution for their scholar, and kind of end a meeting feeling like they came in upset about something and now everyone feels good. Like those are the moments that I get a lot of joy out of. And so that's one of the many highlights.
So my name is Teresa Walsh, and I am the campus director of Democracy Prep Harlem Elementary, right down the street. Similarly, I had a very similar experience as Alexa, actually on the same day. But I was in the process of applying for Leader U, and a leadership opportunity as campus director opened up at DPHE, and so decided to jump right in and take that challenge. And so I found that leadership is really a much different challenge than in the classroom. And the small things that made such a big difference, though, with your kids and with our scholars, those small tweaks make a huge difference with adults as well. And I'm finding that more and more every single day. So I actually think that my biggest challenge and also my biggest highlight is working to empower the teachers and the staff that I'm working with every day. So I think that anyone here is probably a perfectionist. They know the small things to make a problem a solution. And you also are the type of people that are probably like, you're finding the solution all the time. Like it's you're owning that, you're making sure that your footprint is on that. But I think that a great leader is somebody, and I'm learning this every single day, is a great leader really empowers the team and can trust the team with just enough, and sometimes a little bit more than they even expected. And a great leader can just sit in that a little bit, that it's not always the solution that you expected, and sometimes that the solution isn't as fast or as effective as you want, but involving your teammates, involving the people that work with you each day, really not only engages them and but also makes them part of your school. And so it's really important that for me, as I'm growing in this first year as campus director, that I'm ensuring that the leaders at my campus are becoming leaders at my campus, and that each teacher feels like there's not just one leader at the school, that we're all leading from within. I think that there are so many different highlights, and the reason that I chose to be a leader here at Democracy Prep was the highlights that I saw in the schools that I worked in. So I've actually got to work as a teacher at both Harlem Prep and both DPHE, and also taught at a failing charter school before moving into New York City here with Democracy Prep. And I saw the small changes that made a huge difference in terms of the lives of our students. And the opportunities for our students, and now I see as a leader the small different changes, the small areas of support, the emails and the teamwork that happens within the greater Democracy Prep network make a huge difference for the lives of our students. And I also wanted to ensure that the small changes that I knew was happening in my classroom that made a big difference, then I was able to empower others with that knowledge. So I would say that if you are looking to grow as an individual and as a leader, that this is a leader you is an excellent opportunity for that. And you'll grow in ways that you didn't realize that didn't even expect to. I thought that I would grow in finding solutions, and I thought I would grow in making sure my footprint is on everything. But really, this opportunity will allow you to see, sometimes you don't know where you're headed, but fortunately you have a lot of great people to lean on for support, both within other leaders in the network and at the network support too. But I would push for you to see the good in you and what you bring to the team, but also making sure that you're listening to others and hearing each voice that's so important to your leadership.
Anwar, you're actually on the Venn diagram, the fellow and no leader, so
So I'm in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Nice. So we're talking about position, what brought us to leadership.
Why leadership and why at DP specifically?
Why leadership and why. So my name is Anwar Abdul Rahman. Currently I'm the principal at Democracy Prep Harlem Middle School. With my colleague over here who's at Democracy Prep Elementary School. I actually started at Democracy Prep as a science teacher, founding science teacher at DPH. When it was just DPH, there was no MPH or HH. And for me, just coming to Democracy Prep, just the culture and the type of school was just a big change from where I was at before. So I did about 4 years in the Department of Education as a 5th grade, 6th grade, 3rd grade teacher. And it was like fighting battles every day. And I say to myself, it was a situation where some days I would win, some days I would lose. So days I would win, meaning that kids would be listening to me at least, and I wouldn't get cursed out. Days I would lose, kids fighting, getting very aggressive in classes. And coming to Democracy Prep, that never happened. I felt like I was put in a successful position every single day I came to work, no matter what obstacles were thrown at me. And that's one of the reasons why I really fell in love with Democracy Prep. Prior to coming to Democracy Prep, I knew that I wanted to be a school principal. And before even joining the Leader U program, I was in a program outside of Democracy Prep to become a school leader. And I dropped out of it. And the reason why is because I was very committed to the mission of Democracy Prep and the people that I worked around at Democracy Prep. It was just great, and also being part of the founding team and seeing something from the, starting from the bottom. Now my 10th graders are here right now, at DPH High School, so it's great to see that as a school leader and as a teacher. So in terms of things that made me want to be a school leader at Democracy Prep, once again, the staff and the support, And I think having an outside perspective made me realize how much support is actually given at Democracy Prep. I've never felt that I wasn't supported in any way as a teacher or as a leader. Challenges is something that I really enjoy. Right? We always say we want to be pushed. You want to be pushed. You know, it's like a buzzword up there with rigor and everything. But it's great to be in a position as a leader where I get to analyze myself every day. I'm working with about 41 people, and I didn't realize it until kind of like this year. I started to realize wow, I'm really being analyzed, and it's not because people just want to criticize me, or it's because that, like me, they want the best for the kids, and as a leader, it's my responsibility to provide that. So at the top, I gotta get some criticism. I have to adapt to it. So having that experience and being in a position to adapt every day and figure out what problems are going on in my school that I need to fix, how I can empower others, it's a beautiful challenge, and it's one of the reasons why I still am a leader. And I got teachers from our school here right now, and just for me, it's not like once you become a school leader, that's it. You're continuing to grow. Just like a third-year teacher is going to get better as a fourth-year teacher. So I look at it as like a long process in which I hope to get better at as the years go on. So in a nutshell, talked about the challenges, talked about why I'm here, and thank you guys for listening to my little soliloquy on leadership.
And we want to thank Anwar, who has another engagement, so thank you for taking the time on a rainy day to run all around Harlem to make sure that you were able to talk to us. So thanks so much.
6:30, I can stay till 6:30.
Okay. I'm just giving you your chance. All right. So why don't we start with Katie, because you're in the 2-year program, and also talk through why you chose the 2-year program as opposed to the 1 year as well, and then we'll go to Sean and Deirdre.
Sure. Katie Williamson, I'm at DPE, I'm the Leader U resident, so I'm doing the 2-year program, which I would love to talk about, I'm a big proponent of. The reason I wanted to go into leadership, I was never somebody that imagined myself as a school leader, but as I was a founding teacher at my school, and because of that, I was kind of thrust into this leadership position of a grade level chair, and started feedbacking teachers, and I realized that I really enjoyed that part of my job, and I liked working with adults. So I was interested in Leader U because of that, and I think the residency program is a perfect opportunity for people who aren't quite sure, and that's kind of where I fell. I said I liked working with adults, but I wasn't necessarily ready to say I want to be a school leader next year. So that's been really wonderful to have that opportunity to kind of get my feet wet, coach teachers, have an associate teacher that I'm working really closely with, and also kind of have the opportunity to still remain in a classroom and kind of think through what I wanted to do in terms of my leadership trajectory. The thing that I like the most about being a resident is working with my associate teacher. She's unbelievable, and I got really lucky. But having that really close relationship with somebody has been really rewarding, and seeing somebody who is fresh out of college and didn't know anything about teaching and is now holding it down in a classroom has been really cool. I've worked with teachers who were a little bit more seasoned before, which is also very rewarding, but really feeling like you got to grow somebody from nothing into everything has been really cool. I would say my biggest challenge has probably been wearing multiple hats. I think it's, as a resident, it's kind of a little bit weird to be in a position where you're still a teacher and you're still responsible for this class, but you're also, as the year goes on, taking on more and more of the admin piece. And so I would say that it's definitely a program for some people who are flexible and kind of a go-getter, because you can I think you can get stuck in just your classroom and just worrying about what is happening for your grade level, and I think you have to be somebody who really is going to push yourself to take up those little opportunities that present themselves to you and really take advantage of that year where you can try leadership out without necessarily committing to being a school leader.
One thing I have to say is that it was not luck, it was because you and Margaret were very good at hiring. So let's separate out luck with actual skill there.
We're lucky that you walked through the doors.
And
then we realized that you were wonderful.
Good evening. My name is Sean Stevens. I am the Leader U Fellow, the 1-year program at our flagship, Democracy Prep Charter Middle School. I was a founding teacher alongside Katie Williamson at Democracy Prep Endurance in 2011, and I was told we can be honest. So Katie's looking at me. No, Anwar stole parts of my story, but I was a dean of students in my tenure at Teach for America. My principal was murdered. So I was in the bottom of the bottom in DC, a very, very low performing charter school. My principal was murdered, and so I guess I became the most capable person to be the dean of students in my second year of TFA. And being removed from that position showed me how much I did not know about education and did not know about teaching. And so the desire to go back into the classroom was really, really strong. And got recruited by Margaret Mark, who was an awesome school leader, and said, you know, we're founding a school, why don't you come back to New York City? I said, perfect, this is God sent. I'm from Harlem. It's a school 7 blocks away from where I grew up, and so a large part of why I do the work that I do, especially with the Moxie Prep, definitely because of the mission, but also because it's right here in Harlem, and I have such a strong connection to my hometown, to the environment that raised me. One of the biggest challenges, and there are a couple right now, especially specifically for Leader Youth Fellow program, is to sort of be removed from an environment that you feel comfortable in, especially if you're already a part of the network like many of you are, to go to a brand new staff where they sort of know you but kind of don't know you, and sort of navigating those relationships and how am I going to be a leader here and how am I going to get to know people, and managing the time that we spend with building excellent schools and the time that we have at school, at our school site was kind of hard in the very beginning. Like, here's this guy who's going to be like our principal or assistant principal, some sort of leader, and sort of navigating those relationships is what has been very, very challenging, but also very, very rewarding, right? Because when you hire this new staff, your job is to equip them, is to inspire them, is to lead and to lead them, and so figuring that out has been very, very difficult, but under the great leadership of the principals there, and Ms. Roth and Ms. Nunez, they've been able to sort of give me all the tools that I need in order to make that successful transition. And lastly, coaching teachers is way harder. I guess that's because I'm in that initiative right now, coaching teachers effectively, because I know everything there is to know about middle school math, but I walk into an ELA room or writing room and it's like, whoa, how am I going to coach this teacher who's been teaching this for 8 years? And so navigating that initiative has been super, super challenging, but very rewarding as well, because you're able to sharpen those lenses. As a school leader, your biggest job is to make sure that you're pushing teachers. Your biggest job is to make sure you're going in and making sure that the best version of X teacher or Y teacher is standing in front of scholars every day and pushing the lever. And so that's been challenging for me in that I'm not as well versed in a lot of middle school, high school, elementary areas, but knowing that K through 12 trajectory and knowing what it takes at the high school level, knowing what they need at the elementary level to be super strong in middle school has been a very, very rewarding and challenging experience.
I am Deirdre Smith, and I am the Leader Youth Fellow at I come to Democracy Prep actually with quite a bit of history in the charter world. And so I guess my story is a little different. And I guess we're on opposite ends of the spectrum because I guess I'm the poster child of you're not too old. Having been a dean of students for over 10 years, I am Teach for America Core 93, and I say that proudly. And so having seen the landscape of the charter world change quite a bit, it has been a very interesting and exciting process. I loved being a dean of students, and that's why I did it for as long as I did, because I really, really enjoyed that kind of tough love that I think is a big part of doing that job. But also got a lot of push from people who cared about me and who watched me grow to say, okay, what's next? And had heard great things about Democracy Prep and heard about the work they were doing here in Harlem. I had worked in Harlem previously, and so through a conversation with Jonathan, got to learn a lot more about it and felt like this was a good match for where I was in my career and in my life. The one-year program really appealed to me because, as you know, Lisa and Katie and I have had lots of conversations about the strengths that I bring, but really feeling like I wanted to grow myself around like some of the things Sean said around really looking at instruction in some other ways. I had the benefit, I guess the pleasure and the curse of being the first dean, the founding dean in a lot of places. And so my eye has been on culture exclusively. I've built systems for everything from the ground up, and I've worked K-12. So a lot of experience doing that, and just by virtue of the nature of the work of places I've been, instruction was just not a place where my leaders needed me, and so did not put my eye there. And so this year is really, for me, a lot about looking at instruction more closely and really kind of building my eye around that. And so that, I would say, probably is the most challenging. And Anwar can definitely attest to my million conversations like, what is this? Is this okay? And he's like, just be calm, it's okay. It's cool as always, right? So, that is definitely where I feel like, you know, the challenge comes. And then again, like Sean also said, being a new person, I find that kids are kids wherever you go. And so the kids are probably the easier ones to win over, but it is getting to know adults and really kind of taking the time to let people get to know who you are, and so that you can coach them in a way that makes them feel valued and respected, and not just, I'm the old lady that walks in and because I'm old I know everything, because I don't. And so wanting to make sure that I build strong relationships with the staff, so that they do know that I genuinely want to see them grow. My attitude about leadership is that good leaders are always preparing good leaders. And so I do think it's really important that I am constantly looking at how to support Anwar and support the teachers and the other leaders in our building to be the best that they can be. And so that is, I think, the pleasure that I get in the work, is building those relationships, having those conversations where someone can come and bring an idea and I can toss around and be a thought partner, and people walk away feeling empowered to say, either then have a bigger conversation with Anwar or go implement something in their classrooms. And so that's what it's been for me.
I can't snack, so I usually do some clap and silent applause mixture. So now I want to open the floor to all of you guys and your questions. And so you may have specific questions for specific people, or you may have a general question, so just front load it that way. But now we'll open the floor. Jess.
I had some more general questions, but I am not totally sure if leadership is where I want to be, but I'm just interested to hear what you guys have to say. I think, like, by far the best part about teaching that I love is those interactions with the kids on a day-to-day basis and really getting to know them really well. And I guess I just wanted to ask you guys if you feel that you've lost any of that being in a leadership position, if you feel that it's any different, or like what are those interactions with kids like from that position?
Someone else go first this time.
I'll be quick. It wasn't until my first difficult conversation with an adult that I was like, oh, I'm going back into the classroom. And you sort of miss it, but the good thing is that, like, in our roles as Leader U fellows, we still have I have the opportunity a lot to sort of get into classrooms and get to know kids a little bit more, which strengthens my leadership voice as well. And then walking around the kids, walking around the school, giving deductions, or having a strong voice on some children. I think that in this role, you get the best of both worlds for a little bit of time, because you're able to get into classrooms when you have to sub here and there. Like I'm subbing like 3 times this week, and last week a couple of times, and you just sort of step up in that role to say, like, yeah, I can take this classroom, like, yeah, let's do that. And it's also giving me an opportunity to teach classes that I've never had an opportunity to teach, like 7th grade writing or 6th grade ELA, and so you just push yourself even more instructionally to sharpen that lens. So it's a good time. It's like the learning year, right? And when you're a Leader U fellow, you do get that face time with kids. Obviously, when you become a leader, it gets a little bit different, so I'll pass it to those guys.
But I think that was my biggest hesitation too, because I love teaching and I love the students more than anything. But I think that I find every single day a way to stay connected to the students and stay connected to the actual classrooms and what's happening, because a great leader, if they're not connected to the students and to the families too, then they're not going to be a great leader. I think that a great leader models. A great leader is in the trenches with everybody else. So in the past few days, I've got to go into both 1st grade and kindergarten and do lessons. which has just been excellent and gives me helps me refine what I need to do too as a leader. And I think it's like what challenge do you want at the moment. So I really last year really thought I was going to teach forever, and I was very open about that. I really decided like, wow, I really love it. But it was when the opportunity came up, it was like, no, I really am ready for this challenge, and I could go on teaching for the rest of my life. I really loved it that much, but I was ready for this challenge and thought that I could positively benefit other people's classrooms.
This is primarily for Teresa and Alexa, but Sean, Katie, and feel free to jump in. As you guys have moved into the leadership position, what's kind of like one thing that you wish going in, since August and when you guys started, that you wish that you had developed that skill set prior to entering your school?
It's a big time.
Sure.
You go.
I know what just popped into my head was summer PD that's a big thing to be leading for 4 weeks basically, and that was a huge challenge. And I will say, like, as a first year leader, that was a huge challenge for me. And fortunately, I was supported by a lot of great people from each of your campuses. But I think that was something that was the biggest challenge for me to overcome, was how do you set up both returning teachers, veteran teachers, brand new teachers new to democracy prep all at the same time, and get those scholars ready at the same time. So that was the biggest challenge. But I think that once that hurdle was taken care of, I mean, the pride that comes with knowing that people feel set up and supported in day one is something that like leaves you with, okay, now I can sleep now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were both like up very late in those days, so was also a challenge for me. I think one thing I wish I would have known is that change, even that people are bought into, is still hard to implement. And so, so I kind of went into it with this attitude of like, okay, and like, you're gonna bring up things that are a problem, and we're gonna figure out the shifts that we need to make. And so kind of almost as a way of easing myself or feeling better at the beginning of like, well, we can change anything that doesn't work, and we can adjust structures if we need to, and not really anticipating that like, even if everyone's like, yeah, we should change this thing, and everyone is on the same page, if it changes the structure of everyone's day and it's October, like that's a big deal, even if everyone's like, that makes sense. So really spending that time on the front end to think about what do we think is the best way to set up this structure and this curriculum and this and that, and being ready to kind of stick to that unless there's some sort of dire reason to shift it, because I feel like I spent the month, like 2 weeks in October implementing a change, and it went okay, like things are fine, that I didn't get as much time doing the leader jobs in classrooms that I wanted to be doing at that time. So that was sort of like a lesson learned.
Is that Lindsay?
Yeah. Can you speak a bit more about the decision between becoming a resident versus becoming a fellow, and how you made that decision? If you always knew, or what you considered?
I mean, we both kind of, like Sean and I applied the same year for the same school and like made the opposite decision, or not the opposite, different decisions. And so I think kind of hearing from both of our perspectives. I knew I wanted to do residency. It wasn't something, I didn't ever think about doing the fellowship right away because I wasn't sure that I wanted to be a school leader, and I thought that, I really think that having a 2-year program is an excellent opportunity if you're not sure. I think if you go into the fellowship, like certainly there are different paths that different fellows take, but it's something that you're committing yourself to like really diving into being a school leader, and I think residency is a great opportunity for people who aren't quite sure yet. Really get like able to get your feet wet without taking that full dive and kind of like keeping one foot in the classroom while you're still figuring it out. So I would say like that's the reason that I decided to be a resident.
I knew I was going to go into the fellowship. once I left my position at DC as Dean of Students, I knew that I wanted to just go into the classroom just a little bit longer, just to sharpen my eye on what it feels like to be a classroom teacher, and so that I get a little bit more background, a little bit more instructional foundation before I went back into leadership. But I knew that for my own professional goals that I was going to spend 2 more years in the classroom and then transition to a Dean of Students role or AP role or a school leader at some point. So I knew that the fellowship program was the best decision for me.
I'm just curious what kind of changes in lifestyle happened after you stepped out of the classroom. Like time management, was it high pressure? Was it easy transition? That was one. And the second one was, it sounds like all of you went to schools that you were familiar with. Is that a choice that you have, or is it open? But the first question first.
First. I mean, time is what you make, right? I think you just have to be really diligent in the choices that you make. You really have to think about, the 80-20 rule, like what's going to maximize your time. Even as a school leader now, I realize, and I love talking to kids all the time, I love talking to parents, I can't sit and talk to parents for 3 hours a day. Like, you can't just come in. I learned that recently. Actually on Monday, a parent came in and wanted to meet with me. I said, well, I have coaching stuff I need to do, and making sure that you know what's the most important thing, and at the end of the day, kids are most important. And if it's not directly influencing kids, then you need to put it to the backbone burner. I do think that it's in the line of work that we do to maintain some sort of work-life balance, which is really hard. Even if that's like, I know for me, it's going home and watching an episode of Martin. Like, I gotta cut everything off and just watch Martin for 30 minutes, and then I'll be good. I can get right back to work. Whatever that is for you, you make it work. But I can't say that my time is a little bit more strained than when I was a classroom teacher, but getting strategic about where you put the most effort is what's going to maximize your time, really.
I think my time has shifted in a way. I think I'm spending more time than I was as a classroom teacher, but not dramatically more. I think the way you think about your time has to change. I think teaching is very task-oriented. It's like you make your copies and you lesson plan for the next day and you do your grading and you can kind of check a box. Where this role is much more proactive, and it's a lot more long-term projects. So it's things that I have to, I don't have to do this tonight, right? Or even this week, but it is something that needs to get done for our school and for our kids. And so it's changing the way that you think about work into a much more of a long-term perspective, which has been an adjustment for me, honestly, because I think I went from a role of done, cross that off my planner and move on, and your job is never done. Especially when you're thinking about those long-term pieces. And so, but one of the great things about the residency is that part of the idea of having an associate teacher is it frees up a lot of your time on some of those tasks that you don't necessarily need to be, it's not the best use of your time for kids. I shouldn't be spending my time necessarily making bulletin boards when I could be feedbacking teachers or developing some sort of initiative on our campus. And so, I've had a lot of time freed up on things like grading, on things like bulletin boards, on things like copies, which makes a big difference. And so having that associate teacher has been wonderful for that reason.
A resource really quickly. I feel like I work on the calendar. But if you don't know about the Uncalendar, please get on it. It is revolutionary. And also, just to answer your question, I never knew how much time emails would actually take up of your life as a school leader, and literally I have to structure, here's when I'm going to check my email and respond to the most urgent things. And so small things like you sit in front of your computer for 45 minutes looking at emails and really haven't done anything, thinking about where you use your time and what's going to maximize it.
But when you don't answer one email to one person, that's a huge deal. So even though it feels like one of literally 200 emails you'll do or perhaps not respond to, that will be a big deal to that teammate. But I think that the biggest change in lifestyle for me, and maybe for other people too, it's you really have to own your time now. So at DPHE, we're really struggling with space. So my office is just out right next to the copier. And I had to put up a wall, just a partition, because every time somebody would go to get a copy, they would come and check in with me. And so they were owning their time with me, but I wasn't owning my time. And so I would go home at 9 o'clock at night and do all the things that during the day I should have done. And once I shifted that, I think that I've become a more productive person because I'm now owning my time. So finding the way. I also think in terms of lifestyle change, as a teacher, your day is so structured. You know where you're going to be at 9:21. I had a bathroom break. I knew every single day that's when I ran to the bathroom. And now, during that first few months of leadership, you're really like, okay, where do I need to be? And you're setting that schedule. Like, when should I be giving feedback? When should I be doing observations? When do I have time to work with parents and administrative tasks and answering emails? So finding that balance and creating the structure that has always been created for us as teachers has been the biggest lifestyle change for me.
So as a fellow or resident, are you, like, do you feel like your focus is with this, like, third task given by the principal, or do you feel like it's like you come to like leader you, whatever you guys do here, and then you kind of point back to your schools on what's like the big hits, or is it really like principal and you working together to figure out what your best fit is for that school?
I think Lisa's done a really great job of kind of like marrying those two things, and like we do have like projects that we're doing through the residency. I'm also doing a program with BES where I have like projects through that, but I think that Lisa's done a great job of making sure that anything that I'm doing for any of those programs is something that's going to be good for our school and good for our kids. And so I'm not doing anything that I feel like isn't directly impacting the kids that I work with on an everyday basis. So a little bit of both.
Yeah, the joy of working with great leaders like Ms. Roth and Ms. Nunez has been definitely, if I'm not doing stuff for my initiative on coaching teachers, they've said like, Sean, we want you to develop as a leader, like sit with us, sit in on meetings with us, like ask questions, like what is the leadership lesson? So they actually push me every day to say like, well, what did we learn from this email, right? And so the time that I have with those guys has actually been so beneficial, because you sort of see like the inside, right? It's like you get the insider's perspective on what's going on, and you're able, and sometimes they're just like, here, Sean, we're gonna push this over to you. Why don't you go have this conversation? And it's scary at first because you're not used to those type of conversations or that situation, but you're able to circle back with those guys and say, hey, did I handle this correctly? Did I do this right? What should I have said differently? And you sort of get like the expertise from your principals, but they also say, listen, if you would like, you want to take this hour a day to like read an article on Common Core or do something like that that's going to push your professional development, you can work with your principal. And I think the biggest relationship that you can sort of leverage, other than building excellent schools and with Lisa, is really the relationship that you have with the principals that you see every day. And literally the first week I got there and said, hey, what do I need to do? Like, give me a list of things, I'll check it off, like use me. And if you're willing, it sounds weird, if you're willing to be used by your principals, then you're going to get the most out of this fellowship.
To add some clarity, I think it's important that our Leader U program reflects the philosophy of Democracy Prep, and I think one of the reasons that I chose Democracy Prep and continue to stay at Democracy Prep in my 8th year is that Democracy Prep was very clear on the vision, very clear on the bottom lines, but at the end of the day recognized no one solved the achievement gap, and so we're not going to have dogma. We're not going to be tied to things that don't work just because they worked 5 years ago or because we've already codified it and, well, we're not going to change the plan. And that's what excited me about Democracy Prep, what convinced me that there is a place in the charter world for me. And so we want a Leader U program that reflects that. And so I'm sure at times the fellows and the residents would just like me to tell them what to do. But the fact is that leadership at Democracy Prep means that you have the bottom lines, you're taking the things that have already been figured out and then figuring out more stuff and making it your own and making it better. And so if it was too top down, if it was too structured that you must do this, then we wouldn't be preparing you for leadership. So there's a lot of managing up. I don't actually put too much on the agenda. Leader U fellows and residents must manage their agenda. At the end of the day, your job is to kick ass and to serve kids. Whatever you need to do that, you need to manage up and let me know so that I can support you. So there's a lot of self-advocacy that we ask and self-awareness that we ask from our fellows and residents, because that is the thing that we can't teach, and that's the thing I think that makes all of the people who are up here as amazing as they are. So just want to add that.
For the entire panel, excuse me, how happy are you with your choice?
I'm very happy. I'm really happy. I love my job, and every day I can say that. And I think too that I've said this, there was a day where I was really sick and I really wanted to take the day off, but at the end of the day, you just like every teacher on your team, it's just such an important part of each of the students' lives, and that's just incredible that you are that important that you can't take a sick day, really, which sucks sometimes, but realistically, it's really, I don't think many people can say that.
You should take the sick day once in a while.
I have to take jury duty tomorrow, so.
Yeah, I think I don't think there was another choice when I was asked if I would step into a role that Harlem Prep needed. Like, that was my home, and like that's the school that I had been supporting. So every day I get to help make sure that that's still the good school that we promised the families that were at Harlem Day, the failing school before. Like, we promised that we'd make it awesome, and so I get to live that job, and it's very hard, but I can't imagine not having done that.
Super happy. I think so many leaders sort of get thrown into leadership positions, and like we said, like we discussed earlier. Well, she's saying like, no, why wouldn't you take it? That's her standpoint, which is great. But like, you're never going to actually be prepared, but to actually take off an entire year or 2 years and really hone in on the things that you are not necessarily weak on, but things that you can grow on, and like if you're under the tutelage of like great leaders already, you have this opportunity to really figure out what this leadership thing is, and to figure out like, am I this type of leader or that type of leader? Would I have made this choice or made that choice? What effect did that decision have on the team, and how you think you might operate with that if that decision's made? So you have this entire year to sort of like, honestly, not watch other people make mistakes, but sort of follow along and see like the choices, right? The pitfalls, and the honest reflection. Like, I sit with my school leaders sometimes, and they're just like, yep, we dropped the ball on this, how do we fix it? And I think that's the joy of this, is you're still in that phase where you can watch people say, how do we fix it? And when you encounter that same situation, although it might be a little bit different, you'll have a lens to view that specific situation through. So this entire year to sort of find yourself, honestly, and to read a lot, and to you have the opportunity to be a part of Building Excellent Schools, and you just have so many people who are in this charter school movement together, thinking with you. It's like a big think tank of awesomeness.
I'm really happy that I made a decision to join Leader U, and specifically with the residency. I think kind of now at the point where like some of the people on my team are like coming into leadership roles as well, and I really feel like I have the opportunity to like think it through and not just do it because like it's the thing that people are doing, or because it seems like the next step. And I think if you're somebody who's not sure yet, like, I'm incredibly happy that I did Leader U, and specifically the residency, for that reason. I think it really gives you an amazing opportunity to think through and experience leadership before you stop teaching altogether and are all of a sudden a principal, and gives you that opportunity to like really try it, which I'm really happy that I did.
I would say I feel really blessed for the experience as well, especially having been in leadership for quite a bit of time and getting a chance to come and through Building Excellent Schools get to see really strong schools all over the country, and then get a chance to tap into those leaders in addition to the great leaders that we have here. Like, that part of the experience is just invaluable. And then I think the other thing is that for the fellows, that we have a cohort. And I feel like I can pick up the phone and I can say, hey, Sean, I need a thought partner. Or Stephanie Jarrett Thorpe, who is one of the fellows in our Congress Heights, Washington, D.C., she and I have roomed for every road trip, and we actually balance each other really well. And so we are thought partners often. She calls me about culture and I call her about instruction. And so I think what really excites me too is that if, moving into leadership potentially next year, is that I know that I have a cohort of people that I can reach out to and say, hey, this is what's happening in my building. What do you have? And I feel people who I know I trust, who I know have my best interest at heart, who I know are going to be like, hey, let's go have a drink, let's talk it out, let's whatever we need to do, that they're going to be there to support me. And I think that's the other great thing about the program, is that the cohort building has really made me feel very supported, in addition to the good pushes that Lisa gives every Tuesday when I see her. and the Lisas and the Sue Walshes, and you don't know who Sue Walsh is, but one of the things that I really also feel blessed about is they will tell you the things that the people who really love you won't tell you. And you need that, right? The people who really love you are going to tell you you're amazing. You're so smart. Oh, they don't know what they're but the people, but Sue and Lisa are going to be like, yeah, it was okay. It wasn't great. It was okay. But I know you can make it better. And I think to be a good leader, you need to be able to hear those things, and it helps you strengthen your eye on how do you surround yourself with people who are going to be that honest with you, because that's how you grow and how you help other people grow. So that is something that I'm really grateful for in this experience.
Yeah, Michael and Jason.
So in the roles that you're in right now, I've heard like reflection, I've heard time management. What are skill sets do you believe are most important for you to be successful?
I think I shared this before, but as a fellow, I believe that the strongest leaders are great instructional leaders. And that doesn't mean that you're in every classroom and you know exactly what kids are reading every single day. So if that's your leadership style, then that's what it's going to be. But I feel that I've taken this year, and I'm going to continue to take this year, to know as much about instruction as possible, about getting into classrooms and creating great teachers, and learning and even reflecting on my own teaching. And like, this, like, I can see how this lesson sucked when I did it, and how I can make it better, or coach someone else on how to making it better. Because at the end of the day, the teachers who are in front of kids are what's closing the achievement gap. The teachers who are in front of kids are what's really pushing that lever of high achieving schools. And I think that's where a leader really needs to step in. Yeah, we have to make the difficult decisions sometimes and have the courageous conversations, and all of those things too are coachable and you can practice with. I think what's super, super important is developing your eye on what creates a great classroom and how to push teachers to get there.
And I think that going along with that, prioritizing, and I don't mean in the time kind of way. I think that our first day of school, I remember like creating a list as I was going around of all the things we needed to talk about, and at the end of the day, the things we needed to fix. And so that first day I gave it to our teachers like, okay, here's the 6 things that are going to be improved upon tomorrow. And in doing so, I really didn't focus on anything, and so day 2 looked exactly the same as day 1. And so learning from that mistake and thinking, okay, really, what is the goal for right now, and why is that important? And there are all these other things, but we're going to get to them in this other way. So I think prioritizing both in time, yes, but in like people, like what is the most important thing for our team right now, and what's the most important for this individual on this team. But I think like the biggest, and maybe I think Alexa, you alluded to this, and I think we've all experienced this, but managing people, and not just managing, but like really inspiring them, motivating them, like pushing when push is needed, and then equipping them when, with what they need to do what you're asking, or to do what needs to be done for the scholars. And that looks different for certain people, that looks different for different teams on your team. Sometimes you really just want to give the afternoon off and give them all work time, but you know truly that they need this. And so how to like message that in the right way, and get them what they need, even if they don't believe me that that's what we need. Yeah.
To go in like a different trajectory, something I think that's helped me be effective is just like knowing the technology that my teachers need to know to be effective. So not letting an operations person kind of take that and be the only person who has that bank, and sort of knowing how I can quickly walk by a teacher who's taking like pictures of a page on their phone to then send to themselves to put in the guided notes saying like, did you know that our copiers like scan to PDF, and then you can just insert the whole thing into your Word document. Like that just happened to be a skill set I had, and I actually found that if you have it, I'm not saying go out and become tech savvy if that's not you, but it is something I found applied really well to leadership, because I'm able to find ways to make life easier for staff from an instructional standpoint that ops isn't always able to see the need for, and then also just knowing what the systems are that I'm asking teachers to execute. I know what it means to say like, I know what I'm asking for and how to support people in doing it more efficiently.
I think my answer is going to be, is that Dr. Lorraine Monroe says, kids can't learn in chaos. And so you've got to have a strong cultural eye. And it's not at the exclusion of instruction, because they are married. And like in any good marriage, it takes both to make it really work well. And so I think, Lisa said about execution, being able to execute on your vision and having a vision. What does it look like, sound like, feel like every day? What is the predictability in your classroom, in your building, in your routines that create the kind of environment that kids can learn in? Because kids need structure and predictability to feel safe. And so that is definitely something that I think every leader needs to have a keen sense of, and be able to convey the why of that, because a lot of times, especially in our charter world, I think we ask people to do things, and that can be sometimes with the conversations, there's a lot of push of like, well, why do we all have to do it this way? And really knowing and understanding the why, and being able to give that why to teachers, to kids, and even to our families who will sometimes push against the like, why do the sneakers have to be all black? What is the big deal with the white line on the sneaker? Like, and I only can speak to that because I've only done that my whole life, fighting about white lines. But really having a clear vision and really being able to convey that and understanding why it's important will also help support the kind of environment where the magic happens in the classroom, because it can't happen if there's chaos.